Welcome to Interactive Narrative. So this week's lecture is going to be online. That means you can watch this video at your leisure. There are going to be a couple activities in it that you're going to need to pause and work through. And then at 7:30, we're going to get together as a class and have a discussion. And also, I'll answer any questions you have remaining about the personas assignment that's due next week. So this week, we're going to talk about a couple things. Number one, what we've already learned. Number two, we're going to talk about the flow of a story or an interactive product. And number three, we're going to learn how to build our own stories in a program called Twine. And that's something that game developers are using right now to develop complex game stories. Here's what we've learned so far. First thing that we learned was, what is interactive narrative? Interactive narrative, as we defined in our class, is that a user has choice that changes the series of events. And in my sloppy handwriting, I've added that definition right here. And the second thing that we learned in class number 2 was who you are designing for matters. So this week, you'll be presenting your senior project concepts. And that means it's a great time to start thinking about who is the target audience for what you're creating, so you can start to envision what a great user experience for them would be. Okay, so now we're going to take a minute and we're going to talk about flows or user flows. And this is when you start planning what your user is going to do and then what they're going to do next and then next, so you understand their series of events. So you just decided on your senior project concept, which is really exciting. One of the next questions you should be thinking of after who am I designing for is WTF. And what I mean by that is, what's the flow? What is the flow of information this user is going to be seeing, and how are they going to be making choices with that information? Okay, so I'm going to pop up on the screen here a shorthand way of writing out the flow in a user interface. And if you see on top, it's what the user sees, on the bottom, what they do, and then that moves over to what they see next and what they do next. So you can see how you can start planning out the actions someone might take in your product. So I'm going to jump over to the whiteboard and we're going to do an example with something in the physical world. So I want to talk a little bit about using the TTC. So if you've used the subway in Toronto, you've probably made some of these choices as you've gotten on the train. So what does the user or the passenger see? So they see the station door. What do? They enter. Okay, now they're inside the station. What do they see next? So we go over here. They see payment option. What do? Maybe in this case, they pay by Presto. Go over here. They've decided to pay by Presto. What's the next thing they see? Maybe they see platform wayfinding or signs telling them which way each platform is. So let's call them platform signs. And let's say that they decide that they are going southbound. So the platform signs, they decided that they were going to go southbound. Then maybe they see stairs to the platform and they take the stairs. And maybe the next thing they see is the train arriving, and their action is to get on the train. So here we have a flow. We see a station door, the person enters, they have a payment option, they pay Presto, they see platform signs, they choose southbound, they see stairs to the platform, they take the stairs, they see a train arriving, and they get on the train. And now, what you can do is look at this again and add a persona to this. So think about who is actually taking the subway, because it might change what options that you think they're going to take. For example, if I was looking at this flow, but someone was using a wheelchair, I can see that there might be an error right here, right? This person has chosen to take stairs, see stairs to the platform, but maybe they need to take an elevator instead. This is how you can start to use flow to plan out how your user might move through their options, but also apply personas to see if a persona might need a different accommodation or a different option. Okay, so this is a flow in the physical world, and this is a short form way of writing out what people see and what they choose. Okay, now we're going to try to do the flow for a digital product, and I thought, why not try Instagram? So today we're going to think about what is the flow for a digital product. Some of you might use Instagram, and our goal is going to be to upload a photo. So now when I click on Instagram, I'm already logged in on my phone, so I'm immediately put on the home page. So the very first thing I see, remember it's C on top, and then what I do underneath. So the very first thing that I'm seeing is the home page, and the next thing I'm going to write is what I do. So I have that open, and I'm going to click at the bottom. I'm going to click on that navigational bar, the plus symbol. Now what do I see? Now I see my photo gallery pop up. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a photo from my library. I see the photo gallery, I choose the photo I want from my library, and click next. So this brings me to my filter page. And what I can do is I can select filter, or I can edit my photo and then click next. Okay, so at this point it gives me a variety of information that it's encouraging me to fill in, which I can do, and then I can click the share button. Okay, so what we've created here is a really basic flow for uploading a photo to Instagram. And this is a method that you can use as you start to rough out some of your ideas for your senior project. No matter how someone progresses through these events and which things they choose to do, like filter or not filter, they are brought to the same end goal, which is to upload a photo. So things get a little bit complicated when you try to map things out and you're trying to map out every single option that someone can have. The next thing we're going to look at is a tool that you can use to make flows, and more complicated flows than this, ones that branch off into different stories, like a choose your own adventure story. The next thing we're going to look at is Twine. So Twine is an open source tool for telling interactive, non-linear stories. What does that mean? Let's back up for a second. So we already know what interactive means. It means that the user is going to have some sort of choice. So when we know that Twine is helping us plan interactive stories, it means a type of story where a user is going to have different options and they're going to get to choose. But what does non-linear mean? If you're looking at a mathematical definition, non-linear simply means it's not a straight line. And that's also true of when we talk about a non-linear narrative. So if you read a story and it progresses in the same way time does, from beginning to end, that could be described as a linear narrative. You're telling the story in the order that the events happened. Now, when we talk about non-linear, it means that a user is not traveling through the story in a straight line. It means they might jump from here to here, back over here, back this way. So if you've watched one of those movies where they jump around to the past and the future and back and forth, then that's not a linear way of telling the story. Sometimes it adds a level of intrigue to a story, as different pieces of someone's past are being revealed as they move forward into the future. So things like that are non-linear. So a good example of something that's interactive, non-linear storytelling would be Bandersnatch. So if you haven't seen that, it's an episode of Black Mirror, and it's hosted on Netflix, where you get to choose how the episode progresses based on your input as a user. And now that's also happened in a couple of other series. One is called, I think it's Into the Wild, and the other one is the new Kimmy Schmidt episode, which is an interactive episode where you get to choose what happens. You have input as a user, and it affects the outcome. So that's an example of non-linear interactive storytelling. So if you haven't seen any of the shows I just mentioned, I'm going to put a link in the description for you to go watch it, or if you have Netflix, pop over there and play around with one of those episodes for a bit and engage. And if you don't have Netflix, I'm gonna find a equivalent video on YouTube that you can watch here. Okay, so pause now, go check that out, and then come on back when you're done. Hi, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your interactive story. Now is the best part of the class because it's the time where you get to make your own interactive story. In this video, I'll show you how to use the software, I'll give you some tips, and then once you're done learning, it'll be your chance to go ahead and make a story. I'm gonna head to twinery.org, and I'm gonna pop that link in the description of the video as well. So there's lots that you can check out on this webpage. There's examples of twine stories that you can take a look at. But how we're going to make our own is we're going to go over here underneath download and we're going to click use it online. So this means we don't have to download anything onto our computer. So one word of caution, if you are using a Mac, it's better to be using a Google Chrome browser or a Firefox browser because there can be some issues in Safari. So I'm going to click use it online. And this is going to bring me to my Story Hub. So if you haven't used Twine before, this is going to be empty for you. I have a tiny start of a story that I'm going to show you. So when I click on it, you can see that these squares are all interlinked. And this is starting to look like a little bit of a flow. But as you notice, from one passage, it breaks off into two options. And that's the way that I've created this one. Okay, so I've created a tiny little story here and I haven't finished it, just to give you a little bit of an example of what you could do. So if I click on here and I click play, this brings you to your Twine story. So as you can see, it has a little bit of text that I've written. You wake up at 3 a.m. and you hear a strange noise. Do you go back to sleep? Investigate the noise. And you'll see both of these are hyperlinked, and I have the ability to click them. So as a user, I have choice here. So I'm going to say maybe I just go back to sleep and I ignore that. You peacefully sleep through the night. And then there's the option to play again. So that's the end of the story if I stay asleep. So maybe I decide to play again. And this brings me back to the beginning of the story. And this time I'm going to choose to investigate the noise. You grab something from your room to protect yourself. What do you take? Your phone, your rock collection. So maybe I pick my phone. You grab your phone and tiptoe to the stairs. The noise gets, oh, it's supposed to be louder. Do you yell, is anyone there? Or proceed quietly? So you can see how making these choices, I'm starting to decide which way the story is taking me, just like in those interactive videos that you watched. So I'm going to pop out of here because I haven't finished this yet. And if you click this little back button, it'll take you back to the beginning. And that's forcing it to go back. And I can pop over here. So now how do you make this? So let's go back to what you're looking at over here. So to create your own, click Story. Let's just call this one Test and Add. And now you can see I have a blank canvas to work from with this one passage added. So if you double click on that passage, it opens up and this is your interface to start building your story. So maybe, give it a title. And this is where you can start to tell your story. If you have no idea what story you want to tell, my suggestion would be start with a flow that's something that you're doing every day in your life. Maybe you wake up, you brush your teeth, you eat breakfast, and then create an alternate version of the story where something crazy or something different happens. But at least you're following a story that you know in your head. So, you wake up at 6 a.m. What do you do first? Maybe you check your phone, maybe you make coffee. Maybe you eat breakfast. Okay, so you wake up at 6 a.m. What do you do first? And if you notice this, these options that I've put in brackets, those are two square brackets on either side, that turns blue. So what that's doing there is that's going to create 3 interactive choices for your user, and anything in those brackets is going to be clickable. So if I go over here and click, you're going to see that option now connects to 3 other options. So now if I hover over that first one and click play, you're going to see the text that we wrote. You wake up at 6 a.m. What do you do first? And then it gives you your options. Now if I click on one of these, it just says double click on this passage to edit because it's not filled in yet. So when I go back here, I can continue editing my passages. If you actually delete that text out of there, it actually gives you some tips about how to use things. And there's also a significant amount of documentation online about how to do things like change the font or add pictures or videos to your story. Okay, so the rest of the class time I'd like you to use to build your own interactive story in Twine. When we get together at 7:30, I'm going to get a couple students to present their stories, and those that don't get a chance to, you can share them in the discussion board this week. We'll also have a chance to talk about anything related to the personas assignment if you have any lingering questions there. Okay, that's it for this week's class. I'm going to be online on Slack from 5:30 to 7:30 before our discussion starts if you have questions about how to use Twine that aren't answered in this video. There's also a lot of documentation online. We'll add some links to the description of this video to give you some resources to help you out there. Okay, I'll talk to you at 7:30. Enjoy the rest of your day and talk soon. Bye!